have the idea to create the perfect mid-layer. I've never sewn shearling before, I've never sewn fur, and I've never used an industrial sewing machine. So I decided to design and make my own vest from scratch. Before anything else, I knew I needed to get my design right, not just visually, but structurally. Because with something like shearling, every mistake is permanent. My goal wasn't to just make something that looked good. I wanted it to be durable, functional, and something I'd actually wear for the rest of my life. I used an old blanket to make every sample. It had a similar thickness and weight to shearling, which made it perfect for testing. I started by drafting my first pattern off a vest I already owned. It gave me a baseline to jump off of, but almost immediately I started changing things. I made one sample, and then another, and then 4 more. Each time I adjusted something, the length, the shoulder width, the depth of the armholes, the neckline, or the overall fit. Small adjustments that completely changed how it felt. By the 6th sample, I actually started to understand what I was making. I kept coming back to the same idea. Fewer pieces meant fewer seams, which meant fewer failure points, and ultimately a stronger, more durable garment. My goal was simple, to make a vest out of just 3 pieces. But that's where I hit a constraint I didn't expect. My back panel was too large to fit onto a single hide. And that was my first real lesson working with fur. It doesn't follow the same rules as regular fabric. You're working with the shape of an animal, and that changes everything. So my design had to change, not because I wanted it to, but because it had to. I split the back into 3 panels, enough to make everything fit, but still strong. This let me use 2 hides instead of 3, less waste and fewer compromises. My final design ended up being boxy, oversized, and wide through the shoulders. Deep armholes so I could layer it over anything. A shorter length so it wouldn't get in the way of movement, and a neckline that sits close to protect me from the wind. There was a lot more for me to design, but at least I had my starting point. At this point, I had a pattern, but I didn't really know how to make it real. I'd never sewn anything like this before. I'd never used this machine, and that was intimidating. Instead of just pushing through blindly, I decided to slow down and learn from my machine. I had so many questions, and that meant running a few tests. My first test was really simple. 2 layers of shearling stitched together at 2 different stitch lengths, 5mm and 10mm, with tensions ranging from loose to tight. When the tension was too loose, the stitches were loose, weak, and almost unsecured on the backside. Then, when the tensions were too tight, the stitches sank deep into the material and started to look uneven, almost like they were skipping. At this point, I ran into an unexpected problem. The seams didn't sit flat. They were bulging because of how thick the shearling was. The second test went more in depth. How small could a stitch be before the material failed? So I created a grid with stitch lengths from 2 to 8mm and a range of tensions across each one. I also started trimming down the edges of the wool. I figured this would help me keep my seams flat. Anything between 2 and 4mm would actually just cut through the shearling. Too many holes, too close together, and it tears because it's not a woven fabric, it's skin. These are all the kinds of things you can only learn from doing them wrong first. Once I felt like I understood my material better, I moved on to the actual vest. The shearling I chose was a camel-colored merino wool. Merino shearling is incredibly warm, while still being breathable. Wool traps heat ridiculously well, while the suede side adds structure and durability. It's lightweight, flexible, and naturally moisture-wicking, reducing sweat chill in cold climates. The wool texture is soft and dense. It's the perfect natural insulator, and it's built for cold weather.